France has had a difficult past few years, mass terrorist attacks. The country's under a state of emergency. The army's patrolling the streets of the major cities. Now, a French entrepreneur living in Poland is offering what he's calling anti-terrorist training, essentially survival training for concerned French civilians coming here into the woods outside Warsaw in Poland and learning how to fight back.
Poland has achieved a sort of cult status in online right-wing discourse for its illiberal government, flourishing right-wing political scene, and absolute refusal to accept any Muslim migrants, bringing the country's government into conflict with the rest of the EU.
Bo bycie w Unii Europejskiej to nie znaczy zgadzanie się na poprawność polityczną. Chcę powiedzieć o tym, co dzisiaj, szczególnie po tych wydarzeniach, które miały miejsce w Manchesterze. Powstań z kolan i obudź się z letargu, bo w przeciwnym razie codziennie będziesz opłakiwała swoje dzieci.
Poland's government sees itself as the vanguard of a political and cultural counteroffensive against liberalism, mass migration and secularism. Along with Hungary, Poland is increasingly home to right-wing émigrés from Western Europe, attracted by the perceived benefits of a homogenous society.
The fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? Just as Poland could not be broken, I declare today for the world to hear that the West will never, ever be broken.
Among them is Gregory Leroy, the founder of Hussard, a private company offering what it calls anti-jihadist training to French citizens.
Hi, Gregory. Hello.
Hello, Harus.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So what training are you doing right now here?
First, we start with introduction to war medicine, and then we will initiate the participants to combat shooting with handguns.
Can you explain what this training is actually for? What's the purpose?
The purpose of these 2 days are to initiate French civilians to anti-terrorism training and techniques.
When we got here, the instructors, who are Polish, told us we couldn't film them, and we also couldn't explain why we couldn't film them. At the moment, they're giving a kind of combat first aid training. It's very similar to the training that journalists do before they go to combat zones. The only difference is these guys are learning it for living in Paris.
I think you already have to have in your mind that you could die. You know, you have to be really in your mind.
That's why we do it.
You have...
I already told the guys we do it with the plastic bag on the head. So you must do really quick and really good.
Ah, really? Okay.
This kind of combat first aid training,
Yes.
obviously it's useful if you have the tourniquet with you, or if you have the field dressing with you. If there's a terrorist attack in Paris, whatever, obviously you don't know it's going to happen. Are you suggesting that people should be carrying a tourniquet all the time, like in France?
Yes, France is not safe. Anything can happen, and it will be worse and worse every year. So I think in France they should be ready for that, and they should have the tourniquets with them. You know.
I mean, you're making France sound like it's turning into a war zone almost.
Yes, I think yes. France should live like they live in Israel, with a high risk of an attack, and so that's why.
240 French citizens have been killed in France by jihadist terrorism over the past couple of years, with more than 17,000 French citizens officially classified as potential jihadist terrorists, far more than the country's intelligence services can adequately monitor. France is on the front line of Europe's growing jihadist threat.
Okay guys, this is signal 17, we will be using this practice. Drop the gun, point it to the target, reload it, and squeeze the trigger, okay?
Do you think this is training that these people are going to need in their everyday life?
When it comes to gun shooting, right now the French legislation doesn't allow the participants to fire back. But it can be interesting for French to be ready for this kind of scenario.
La situation l'exige de plus en plus. La France aujourd'hui elle est en état d'urgence. Il y a une risque qu'il y ait des menaces terroristes. Ça ne fait que s'amplifier. Et aujourd'hui, le simple citoyen se retrouve acteur de sa propre sécurité, les forces de l'ordre ne pouvant pas intervenir à la seconde. Donc, arrêter de s'entraîner, c'est commencer à crever.
Because those terrorists appear to be like angels of death. They're not. They just have the guns and they decide to kill. And there is some way to stop them. And this is why our participants come. They just want to know what can be done.
For one of the attendees, France's terror threat is all too real. Joe is a survivor of the 2015 Bataclan massacre, where 89 gig attendees were murdered by ISIS hostage takers as part of a series of attacks across central Paris that killed 130 people.
You were at the Bataclan when the attack happened. I mean, that must have been terrible.
Quand il y a eu l'attaque qui a démarré, il y a eu des vagues de gens en fait, qui ont réussi à quitter par les portes, les issues de secours. Donc moi, en fait, c'était pas mon cas, puisque rapidement, en fait, il y a eu un mouvement de foule. Je me suis retrouvé coincé sous des gens, en fait, sous des piles de gens. En fait, moi, j'ai passé 2h30, si tu veux, impuissant à regarder autour de moi les victimes, quoi, les gens se faire abattre. Et comme je ne pouvais pas bouger, tout ce que je pouvais faire, c'était attendre que la police arrive. Et les meilleurs adjectifs, ça serait frustrant, effrayant, évidemment, effrayant et frustrant. Et j'avais ma femme aussi, qui était là. Et je pense que c'est ça le pire, tu vois. T'as l'idée de mourir toi-même, mais le plus effrayant pour moi à ce stade-là, c'était vraiment de perdre ma femme ou qu'elle soit blessée, quoi. Donc c'est ça qui rendait la situation encore pire.
I mean, I can't imagine, but I suppose the worst thing in a situation like that is you must feel helpless, in a way, like unable to protect yourself or to protect your wife. Do you feel that this training would help you in a situation like that?
Oui, l'objectif, ce serait, alors après, j'ai envie de dire, chaque situation est différente. Donc peut-être que la prochaine fois, justement, je n'aurai pas la malchance d'être coincé sous des gens, je serai libre de mes mouvements. Et dans ce cas-là, effectivement, si je suis libre de mes mouvements, je pourrais avoir l'opportunité d'appliquer en fait, les méthodes qu'on voit ce week-end, quoi. Donc c'est ça l'idée aussi.
It's difficult to see what practical application Hussard's weapons training could have in the real world. In France, gun ownership is tightly restricted, and marauding terrorists are unlikely to leave Kalashnikovs lying around for Gregory's pupils to pick up. So why are people paying to come here? And what does that say about the mood in France?
It's not secure in Paris, and I like shooting. I would like to try it.
How is the situation in Paris?
Yeah, it's very dangerous with all the attacks. I was in Budapest. I worked very safe, so without any problems. Without any problems, in Paris it can happen.
So you think like Eastern, Central European countries like Poland, like Hungary, are more safe?
Maybe some category of people can make travel in Paris, and for example here, I think the police is more tough.
In Poland, I cannot deny it, there is a control of immigration. And they don't let anybody come in their country like that. They control their border. There is this homogeneity. Everybody belongs to the same people.
At its basis, how do you see this? Is this survival training? Is this self-defense training?
Oh, I see that. I cannot tell you too much offensive things, so I will have issue with, I don't know.
Sure.
So, I see that. I see that like a self-defense training.
Like you're being very careful how you.
Yes.
Is that because of French law? Or?
As soon as you use some aggressive word, you take risk to be the murderer. I don't know.
Right.
Always better to say we defend.
Sure.
We defend ourselves. Of course, to defend we have to counterattack, but this is essentially self-defense training.
While this training has little apparent use, it does present a warning sign about the polarisation of French society. Is Gregory radicalising people or offering legitimate self-defence training?
From my experience of reporting in the Middle East and Africa, when concerned civilians get together and start training in the woods, that's a bad sign. It indicates a society on the brink of collapse. Are they right-wing nut jobs, essentially? Are they just concerned civilians? Is this just a symptom of a broader fear stalking France?
À propos de la vie à Paris, je connais des gars, ils font des allers-retours en prison, mais bon, parce qu'ils prennent 3-4 mois, ils reviennent, et voilà. Et du coup, les types, ils savent que s'ils font n'importe quoi, ils seront à peine punis, donc ils s'en fichent. Parce que la justice est trop laxiste.
How do you screen people to make sure that you're not training extremists?
Of course. So first of all, there is a Skype. We talk together. For example, when I contact them, do you want to be taken in picture? What is your level? Do you have experience? I go deep in their private life, in fact, you know? So I know them very well.
Do you ever turn people down for training?
When I see the guy doesn't write me correctly, and I send him some precise question, usually what's happened, the guy doesn't have an answer and he disappears. So the guy who keep in question me, we have a conversation on 1 month on this and that with Skype, the guy is clean. But of course, you never know. But I can afford to spend time to talk with my customer. And I'm not ready to take any risk, you know, on that.
You take all your fingers together, you engage the safety, you put your middle finger on the top shelf, and then you go ready. Okay? So, you ready? Bang!
Does it feel strange firing a Kalashnikov after your experiences, obviously after being on the other side?
Oui, c'est plus gratifiant d'être de l'autre côté de l'arme. C'est mieux de ce côté-là. Après voilà, faut voir plus en situation réelle. Tirer sur des cibles, c'est pas comme tirer sur des gens, quoi.
After going through such a traumatic event, does training like this help you psychologically? Does it help you kind of process the trauma that you went through in a way?
J'ai pas forcément pensé au premier abord, mais je pense que ça peut être le cas aussi, en plus du côté pratique, quoi. Tout à fait. Après, il faut voir sur le temps, si effectivement aussi d'un côté psychologique, ça peut être une bonne chose.
Do you see the situation, the security situation getting worse?
En France, qui est vraiment des mesures, on va dire, il n'y a pas beaucoup de mesures répressives, encore moins de mesures préventives. Après, c'est le droit français, hein, tu vois, c'est la législation qui est comme ça. Mais effectivement, la lutte antiterroriste paraît insuffisante. Et je pense que malheureusement, c'est ça aussi qui nourrit le sentiment d'insécurité des Français, des civils, qui font qu'il y aura des gens comme moi ou d'autres qui vont justement réfléchir à la façon de se protéger par soi-même plutôt qu'à avoir recours à la force publique.
They finished their firearms training for the weekend, just taking their kind of holiday snaps together. It's a kind of happy atmosphere. It's like a kind of lads' stag weekend in Warsaw, only under the shadow of terrorism and mass violence. For you, is this primarily a business opportunity, or is it about politics, or is it about providing a service for French people?
Okay, what is my aim? First of all, it's not money, because I'm multi-billionaire, okay? I own an apartment, I have income from apartments. I don't do this for money. In your life, you need a little bit of danger. You need this little thing. I need this little thing in my life. I put myself in danger, not because of the Muslim or those guys. I think the French government, they don't like what I'm doing. And I have to tell you, that brings me some good energy, you know, like I'm not respecting their rules, you know, because I think their rules is not fair. They doesn't encourage men to be men, because we men, we need to fight to feel alive, you know, and nowadays, especially in France, we have no fight, because there is no way French can climb the social ladder. So there is no fight. That's why there is so much depression, criminality. And me giving this service to the French, I'm on a mission, you know. I feel like this has to be done.
The real risk for European society after the constant drip of terror attacks is that there'll be a counter-reaction where the majority populations of Europe will form together for retributive violence, kind of militarization of European populations against their kind of Muslim minority. And on the face of it, the idea of French people going off to learn how to use Kalashnikovs in the woods, that looked pretty worrying. But what we actually saw was something weirder and sad in a kind of different way to that. For Joe, you don't really have to be a psychologist to see that for him, this could be a way of processing the trauma of the horrific events that he went through in the Bataclan, regaining a sense of control really over his own life after that feeling of helplessness he must have experienced. For Gregory, it's hard to see what he's getting out of it. Is it just a business opportunity, tapping into that general sense of fear and anxiety for his own financial profit? Is it a personal crusade of his, and also as a way of essentially trolling the French government that he really doesn't respect? For most of the guys, it just seemed like a kind of weird male bonding ritual out in the woods, playing with guns, finding a sense of meaning and adventure. But it really taps in, I think, to a general sense of malaise, of anxiety, of insecurity in Western Europe. And the longer the situation, the terrorist attacks we've been seeing develops and carries on, I think the more events like this we'll be seeing.